Okay, we're all set. This is Q&A. So, hi, good evening. Okay, it's Q&A. We have two people to start with. What's on the table? Yes.
All right.
Did you know this is Q&A?
I did know it was Q&A.
Okay, fine.
So, okay, just something I've been, I'm curious to hear the opposite opinion, just because I've sort of gone down a path where I'm doing my own research into certain things. And I've taken a pretty rationalist school when it comes to certain things within Judaism. From the Rishonim, obviously, from the rationalist school of the Rishonim, but it seems to me that Kabbalah seems to be a later invention within Judaism, not an older tradition. I'm not saying this to be combative. I just want to know the other side. Why should we accept it? Is there a legitimate reason to accept it? Is there a legitimate reason to say, I don't think we should follow this? I just want to hear Rav's opinion.
Well, on my blog, there's a two-part long scholarly discussion about the Zohar, which you might profit from reading. There's a book called New Perspectives in Kabbalah, written by a conservative Jew who was a professor. I think it was published by Yale. And it was a kind of groundbreaking book. In particular, he was a student of Shalom and broke with him. And he points out that at the time when, let's say, the Zohar was published, there was far less controversy about the Zohar than there was about the guy that perplexed of the Rambam. No one said that the Rambam wasn't working with the Masorah. They disagreed with how he understood the Masorah, but they didn't say he wasn't working with the Masorah. So historically, it doesn't seem to have had that kind of impact. In fact, one of the claims of those who say it came from the outside is that there is documented contact between Neoplatonist scholars and Rabbanim. And the Neoplatonists were influenced by ideas from India. And of course, the way, I won't call it scholarship, the custom to treat Jewish sources has grown up. Everything in Judaism is derived from someplace else. Everything is influenced by something else. It never influences anything else. And his name is Moshe Idel. He asked why, if there's a commonality between them, wouldn't you say that the Jewish scholars influenced the Neoplatonists rather than saying the Neoplatonists? Sorry? He's the author of the book.
Oh, really? Okay, fine.
Moshe Idel. And the truth is that if you look at statements in the Midrash and statements in the Talmud, not to mention the first few chapters of the book of Ezekiel, which wasn't written in the Middle Ages, I hope that's on the page, you find things there that indicate that what's written on the page and what you read intuitively is very, very difficult to deal with. There's a Mishnah in Chagiga, which everybody knows, well, everybody, people who study the Mishnah know, which says there are certain subjects where it's taught only to one or two students and only wise ones, and you only give them chapter headings they have to learn on their own. So it's known as far back as the Mishnah that there was a secret doctrine. There's no question about that.
Right.
So now...
but the question is whether the secret doctrine is the thing we're talking about in the Zohar, or whether the secret doctrine is another type of mystery.
Well, but then you might ask for what the evidence is for the other side, instead of just assuming that if we don't have evidence for this side, the other side is right. What evidence is there that this was taken from some outside source?
So
the answer is, really, aside from questions of authorship of the Zohar, the answer is there isn't any such source. But when you look at statements in the Talmud and you read them with a Kabbalistic eye, you can see right away that the Talmud is expressing Kabbalistic themes in a way that would be kind of neutral, and if you didn't know what was behind them, you wouldn't pick up on it. For example, each of the names of God stands for a quality of action. Why is that? Why would it stand for a quality of action? Why wouldn't it stand for what he is? Even the most proper name of God, the Yud, the Hey, and the Vav, and the Hey, stands for mercy. So according to the Zohar, all we have is qualities of action. We don't have anything of the essence of God. And by the way, Maimonides says exactly the same thing in part 1, chapter 54 of the Guide. And the Ramchal copies the Rambam's word, almost word for word. So your reference to the rationalistic school, I reject entirely.
Okay.
I think that's a scholarly invention, an academic invention. My teacher, Rabbi Meisman, pointed out to me, and I have seen this scores of times, that the supposed antagonistic divide between the rationalists and the mystics is just a fiction. It's just an out-and-out fiction. The difference between the Rambam and the Ramban is very small, very nuanced. It isn't as if they stood at the end of different methodologies and different basic premises and different types of explanations. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So I think that given that we have passages which themselves describe in neutral terms what we know from the Kabbalah is doctrinaire Kabbalah, and you have people like on the Rambam who agrees with the mystics that there's no such thing as talking about the essence of God, but you have to talk only about His actions. The idea that and he certainly wasn't affected by ideas from India coming from Neoplatonists. So the whole thing doesn't have any structure whatsoever. There's no.
But if I may, and again, I'm just asking to seek to understand. I'm not trying to be.
Okay, as you can see, I've been through this before, and yeah.
Oh, right, no, 100%. I'm not asking to be combative. I just simply seek to understand. So the things that I've heard, and these are critiques coming from Rav Leon of Modena and even the Ivets, who brings in later Shadal, and others who bring up like certain things within the Zohar, like the Aramaic is incongruous, and they mention things that seem to be relating to later events. And okay, we could say that's Ruach HaKodesh, but we could also say
what you say is that we don't have the exact original text.
Okay.
Same thing crept into Gemaras also. Okay. We have the Rabban Svaroi who wrote the first few dapim in Bitachon and other places, and everybody agrees to that.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that every last bit of it was made up in the Middle Ages. That's a very poor argument. The fact that there are some later elements, and out of the number of words, how many of these later references do you have? 16 out of 200,000? I mean, what are you talking about? Right. Because a few are scattered here and there, it means the text wasn't kept perfectly pure. That's all.
Right.
Okay, I mean, this is the number of arguments they can make up is without number. But I would, in terms of the Zohar itself, I'd recommend you read the two articles which are put out by a scholar who knows these things well, and he goes through all the things. What did the daughter of the widow say, and what did the people say, and what did the merchants say, and he goes through all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a statement of the Rambam, and please excuse me if I'm not saying it specifically correctly, just the main idea, that he's saying that his work, Ayad HaChazaka, so is profound, and each Jew that wants to execute the halacha, that's only what he needs. His work, the Ayad HaChazaka, it's enough.
I don't think this is profound. He says that those people who can't work through the Talmudic and Gaonic sources, they're not capable of working them through and coming to a conclusion. I've written a book so they'll know what to do.
And the book is inclusive of all they need to know, right?
To know what to do.
Yes.
But that's not all you need to know.
To know what to do, exactly.
Okay.
What like to actually.
That's right.
What right now I'm trying to see how the Shulchan Aruch, the Bet Yosef, concluded in a specific point. The point is that one needs to stand while saying a bracha on a tzitzit, and I haven't found it in the Rambam. Now I'm trying to figure it out how, like, if his work, because this is an action, one actually needs to stand while making a bracha on the tzitzit. So if according to the Rambam's claim that all the actions should be included, then it should be there. And I wonder why it's not there. It's there on the tour in a sense.
I'm surprised at you. I thought you were getting better information than that. The Rambam wrote, according to his tradition and his understanding of the sources, how to arrive at the practical law. It doesn't mean no one could disagree with him. His text was never accepted by the whole of the Jewish people as authoritative, never. It was objected to right away. The Ravid has his comments and criticisms on every page, And by the way, people don't know this. The Ravid wrote very tough against the Rambam. He said that's not logical. It's not meaningful. It's a mistake, right? The Ravid was older than the Rambam. You think, here's the book, here's the commentary must be younger. No, he was older. They were circulating these manuscripts, and he got hold of them, and he said, okay, here's an up and coming. Let's see what it says is correct or incorrect. And he disagreed with it many times. So the fact that we have in the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber took three of the great authorities, of whom the Rambam was only one, and he decided the halacha according to the majority of them. And when two were against the Rambam, he decided against the Rambam. So why would you expect to find it in the Rambam? Yeah, listen again. You asked me, why isn't this halacha that you see in the Shulchan Aruch in the Rambam? The answer is, the Shulchan Aruch didn't always follow the Rambam.
But he should. But in case he do not accept the Rambam opinion, don't I should expect some discussion? Him mentioning that he didn't go with the Rambam because ABC. Should I expect something like that?
So let me ask you a question. The Mechaber in the Shulchan Aruch, right? The one who wrote for Sephardi Jury. Did he write any other books?
So the Bet Yosef, I know he had commentaries on the Rambam itself, and then
that's the Magid. It's a Magid Mishnah on the Rambam,
and
the Bet Yosef he wrote on the Torah.
Okay.
So he wrote all of that in the Bet Yosef in the Torah. It's all there. But this, the Shulchan Aruch, is an imitation of the Rambam. The Rambam didn't write his argumentation. He didn't bring his sources. He didn't talk about alternative points of view and how to decide which is correct or right.
The actions. He said the specific action need to be taken.
Right, and the Mechaber and Shulchan did exactly the same thing. He told you the specific action that you're supposed to be taking. So your question is not a question. Your question is, why did the Mechaber say yes and the Rambam didn't bring it? Because he disagreed with the Rambam. Why didn't he bring his sources? He brought them in the Beis Yosef. You have to read the Beis Yosef.
But again, shouldn't I expect, if he disagreed, to mention, like...
Again, he did that in the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef is his extensive commentary on the Torah, and standard people in yeshiva learn the Torah, and then they learn the Beis Yosef, and then they learn the Shulchan Aruch. I have a chibur, so I do this every day. Right? And then you learn the Shach and the Taz, and sometimes the Prima Godim, and you get the whole picture. But if you don't learn the Beis Yosef, you can't understand the Mechaber. The Mechaber is written for a person who wants to know what to do. So he put this book is to tell you what to do. Now how I got to it, now what I rejected, what reasoning I used, that's in the Beis Yosef.
But each one of them say what to do. The Torah say what to do, and also eventually the Shulchan Aruch say what to do. What I'm just trying to find, trying to point is that if there is a point of disagreement, like whether or not I should expect an explanation of the disagreement, because from my founding there is a disagreement.
I'll try once more, but then I'm just gonna have to give up.
That's okay.
I just don't get it. You started off describing the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam, and he says here's the book to tell you what to do. You didn't ask about that, but what about the Gottleib he rejects, and what about the other commentators who disagree with him, and what about the Gemaras that he rejected? And you didn't ask why the Rambam didn't bring in all those other possibilities and explain them. I thought you understood, because the book wasn't designed to be a commentary. It wasn't designed to be a scholarly exegesis. It was designed to be a book to tell you what to do. So the other ones, the ones he disagreed with, the other ways it could be done, and so forth and so on, he didn't put into his book, because his was a book of law to tell you what to do. I'm telling you, the Shulchan Aruch is the same thing. It's a book of law of what to do. You're asking me, why don't I find in the Shulchan Aruch the other ones who did differently, and why he's doing this way and not doing that way? I say he wrote another book in which he did that. So the question of why he didn't do it in the Shulchan Aruch, because he was imitating the Rambam, who didn't do it in the Mishnah Torah. I can't understand what's left here. I don't think I hear anything's left here.
I did read the other sources.
Of course you did. They're long, they're complicated, they bring lots of different sources, and you have to hold them together in your mind. They're hard. Whether Shulchan Aruch can write, I was just doing it this morning, Shulchan Aruch can write 4 lines, there are 100 lines in the Beis Yosef. It's hard, it's long, it's technical study. Of course, it wasn't written for that. It wasn't. Shulchan Aruch was written for somebody who wants a quick reference and be told what to do. And in that book, it's not going to say, but you could have done like him, and only on Thursdays, and then we don't do that because the month is longer, and I took it from this Gemara, not from that Gemara. He doesn't want a book like that. He wants a book that says what to do. And of course, it won't be the only view on what to do. The Ramah, who writes his Ashkenazi commentary, he had a whole Shulchan Aruch written. And he destroyed it. When he saw that what the Mechaber wrote, he said, okay, that work is done. I'll just make comments here. So now when I, as Ashkenazi, read it, I read what the Mechaber said, and I read what the Ramah said. Usually, I do what the Ramah says. And the Mechaber didn't put it in. Why didn't he put it in? He was writing for Sephardi Jewry. He was writing for his group, on the basis of his sources, and it was a book of psak for Sephardi Jewry. It wasn't for every Jew everywhere. That's why. And yes. Why didn't he put in the Ashkenazi view? Why did he say why he didn't differ for that? Well, those are the words you spoke. Why didn't he put in other views, and why did he reject other views, and so forth and so on? That's just not there because that's not the kind of book that it is. The scholarship was there. That's where he got his authority to write the Shulchan Aruch. Because people read the Beis Yosef, and they read the Makdi Mishnah and said, this man knows everything. He knows all the sources. He's in control of all the sources. So when he comes to a conclusion, we can trust that his conclusion is based on solid knowledge. If he had written the Shulchan Aruch without anything else, I don't think anybody would have paid attention to it. Yeah. Question. Is Q&A. Are you aware of that? Okay, let's go on. If I have another question, let's go on to another question.
Question about Rabbi.
Yeah.
So he speaks here about the level of Hishtadlus, each one in his case. As if I understand correctly, level 2, the more Hishtadlus, the more Bitachon, right? If someone...
Yes, that's true. Okay, I have to understand what he means by it, but that's right. The more effort he does, that's the story with Shmuel, and Shmuel said, I'm inferior to my father. My father checked the fields twice a day. I can only check the fields once a day. So if you come from a certain kind of background, that's what he means. You're much bigger tzaddik. You only check the fields once a day. You don't worry about the fields. You trust God for the good outcome. Why are you inferior to your father who checked the fields twice a day? He looks like he's into money, He's into making sure that his resources are okay. He has less trust in God. That's what it looks like. That's the exact opposite. Shmuel is saying he's inferior to his father. His father checked twice a day and Shmuel checked once a day. The answer is he was on level 2. Level 2 for Rav Tesser is someone who, and he happens to be the kind of person who, the more effort he makes and the more he overcomes his temptation to see the world as natural, the more he succeeds in seeing Akash Baruch Hu in what looks like the natural world, the more the Bitachon he develops. So for him, it's ideal to do as much Hishtadlus as possible because he's succeeding in overcoming the michshol, the stumbling block of being influenced by the effort that he makes to see the world as natural. And if you're in the process of successfully overcoming that and seeing more and more of the Kodesh Baruch Hu is in the world, don't dilute that. Don't dilute that, and don't be distracted from it. And therefore, Rav Dessa says, he will not see miracles. On level 2, there'll be no miracles. On level 3, which is the lower level, there could be miracles. On level 1, which is the higher level, there could be miracles, but not on level 2. It's not a simplistic system. It's not an up-down system, better and worse. It's a very subtle and complex system.
The point of kind of like a reality test stand in this system?
Is it a relativist?
Like a reality test.
Yes.
I mean, like I take an extreme example. Someone which is starving and say, I don't want to do any Hishtadlut because it will decrease my bitachon. So
you haven't first of all, you started at level 2. You're now on level 3.
Okay.
You shifted from level to level.
Yeah.
Well, level 3 has 2 principles operating, and you've mentioned only one. Level 2 does not say do as little Hishtadlus as possible. That's just wrong. Level 3 has on it 2 different principles operating, and the subtlety of level 3 is that when you understand the 2 principles, there's no easy decision procedures for what to do. And all this complexity is in the text. I've taught the text a number of times. So here's what he says. There are different types of psychological effect that effort, naturalistic effort to produce your goal can have. And it depends upon the outcome. If you are engaged in a project and the project succeeds, if it succeeds, then the more effort you put in, the more you will damage your trust in the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Because the more effort you do, the more likely you are to take credit for the outcome. Your ego wants to take credit for the outcome, and you can only take credit for the outcome if you were in control and you made it happen. So if the project succeeds, you don't know that beforehand, but if it succeeds, then the more effort you put in, the more danger you're in. But now, let's take the opposite case. Suppose the project fails. Then there's a certain psychological effect like this. Let's see, the project failed. Why did it fail? Well, normally it takes 40 hours a week to succeed at this, right? How many hours a week did I work? 30? That's why I failed. I failed because I'm lazy. I failed because I'm irresponsible. I failed because I didn't do enough Hishtadlus. Meaning, had I done more Hishtadlus, I would have succeeded. Meaning, I'm really in control. Am I not? And that's why I'm guilty. So doing too little Hishtadlus hurts your bitachon. When the project fails, doing too little Hishtadlus hurts your bitachon. Now imagine that the project fails and I did 50 hours a week of Hishtadlus. What am I going to say? Average for success is 40. I put in 50 and I didn't succeed. Must be that the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants it. Must be he wanted it. So in case where it fails, more Hishtadlus protects your bitachon. More Hishtadlus protects your bitachon. In the case where it succeeds, more Hishtadlus hurts your bitachon. So there's no simple rule. Do more Hishtadlus or less Hishtadlus. Number one, the question is, what's the likelihood of success and failure? And number two, what kind of person are you? Are you the kind of person who from success is affected to take credit for the success? Or are you the kind of person who from failure takes responsibility for the failure and therefore says, again, it's in my hands. I failed because I didn't do enough. And maybe you have both. So then which is stronger? Which are you more likely to do? Take the credit for success or take responsibility for failure? And that's how you try to figure out, in a particular case where you don't know whether you will succeed or fail, how much Hishtadlus you have to do. It is not a rule, do as little as possible. So your question was based only on thinking there was only one rule. You asked for a starving person, we say not to do any Hishtadlus. That question is based only on the thought there's only one rule, do as little as possible. That's not correct. In level 3, there's a rule that says sometimes do more Hishtadlus, sometimes do less Hishtadlus, and sometimes you have to figure it out. And so level 3 that he says that it's very difficult to figure out, and he gives the example of Moses, who sent the spies, and he said that was a test because the Kadosh Baruch Hu is the shlach lecha, the datcha. You decide whether to send them or not. It was a test to decide whether this Hishtadlus was appropriate for the Jewish people, and he failed. He made a mistake in it. Then he shouldn't have done it. And he said, if Moses could fail, so you have to be very careful, try not to fail. Ask for a Kodesh Baruch Hu's help, that you shouldn't fail. But the level 3 is subtle, it's complex, I think it's not always determinable, because it's a matter of your own psychology. What are you more likely to be affected by? He brings Zundel Mesalant, the only thing allowed to see this was to buy a lottery ticket. That means not having won't affect him. Having and winning will affect him. And he also brings a medrash, and this is, of course I always forget the names, but there are 4 kings. King David said, I chased my enemies, and I caught them, and I killed them. The next king said, I could chase them, and I could catch them, but I can't kill them because if I kill them, I'm going to take credit for it. And I'm going to lose my bitachon. The third king said, if I chase them and they run from me, I'm going to take credit for it. I'll stay home and pray. And Chizkiyahu said, if I pray, I'll take credit for it. I'm going to go home and go to sleep. Let HaKadosh Baruch Hu take care of it. So he said, you see, the amount of Hishtadlus depends upon the effect it has on your bitachon. But Dovid HaMelech could do the whole job by himself and credit the Kodesh Baruch Hu with everything. And each of the succeeding kings, the more if he would do more, if he would do as much as was available to him, then he would take credit for it, so he did less. So the amount that you do depends upon what effect it has on your bitachon. That's his example. So it's a very complex and subtle determination on level 3. And the vast majority of us are on level 3. So that's why, that's where the real impact of the argument is. Levels 4 and 5 are below most people, and levels 1 and 2 are above most people. Okay, by the way, if you read that, I hope you read Nes V'Teva, which is the preceding essay, and that gives the background, because this idea of seeing Kodesh Baruch Hu in the world, that's what Nes V'Teva is about. It's more philosophical, but it's really an introduction to this essay. Right there, it's right in the same book, the preceding essay. It's quite a challenging essay, but at least to get the gist of it is, you see, when people talk about belief, Rav Dessler was everything. He knew everything. When he came to Panovich, they told him, you can say what you want, but don't give your sources, because some of his sources were Kabbalistic, some were Hasidic. And they didn't want to start a war in Panovich, the Hasidim against the Misnagdim and so on. But I can see where he quotes some Hasidic sources. So he really knew the whole gamut of Jewish thought. But here, as a Baal Musar, to him, the psychological reality of what you're doing is very important. It's very central. And here, the amount of bitachon that you're supposed to do depends upon the psychological effect it will have on you. And you have to delve into yourself and be honest to understand the psychological impact. Someone, he says, I'm your Kippur, and you're Kippur and Tshuva and Slicha and Kedusha and everything else. And you say, okay, that's it. No more, I don't know, soda. Coke. No more Coke. Or whatever it is. How are you going to feel in March? Maybe in March you can't take it. Maybe in March you're not going to be able to live with it. You regret it and you won't be able to live with it. Well, then it's not a good thing to decide on Yom Kippur. You have to be realistic about what you can take. I met a fellow, a very sad case, nice guy, a frum guy, a sincere guy. And he went to yeshiva. Now, he's probably my age, so he went to yeshiva in the Middle Ages. And he I don't remember the yeshiva was in New York, and they said they were going against college. In those days, yeshivas were against college across the board. Don't go to college and everything else. He didn't go. All his friends in yeshiva went, and he didn't go. He made a bare living. He was able to support himself, but no more. Those who went to college made more money. They gave more money to the yeshiva, and the yeshiva honored them. And he was bitter and disappointed. Now, I'm not saying the yeshiva did the wrong thing, because one of the reasons you honor people is to get people to do more mitzvos. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi used to stand up for rich people, so that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with it. But he couldn't take it. He was bitter and disappointed and regretted the fact that he had followed the yeshiva's advice. That's something you have to be careful about. If you don't do Hishtadlus and you end up with too little and then you regret it, then it's worse than doing the Hishtadlus. So it's a difficult psychological reckoning to figure out what it is that you have to do. That's Odessa. Yeah.
So my next question is about the Akeidas Yitzchak. So although I try a few times to kind of like conclude like the main idea, I just can't figure it out. So it's there I can explain what.
Yeah. Okay.
What did they call? What's the like? Yeah. Exactly.
Well, one of the main ideas is that if a Kodesh Baruch Hu tells you to sacrifice your son, you have to sacrifice your son, and it's right. I know you were trained from childhood. So was I. I was brought up Reform. What I was taught was, you see, it was called off at the last minute. That's because killing your child is barbaric. It's savage. It's ill. It's immoral. It's criminal. It's obscene. And, blah, 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 blah. And also, it's not woke. Well, today it is woke because you can kill Jews if you. Okay. But you see, the text says that the angel says you passed the test because lo chasachta es bincha es yichidcha mimeni. You didn't hold back your son, your only one, from me. You didn't hold him back. That means when I commanded you to kill him, you were ready to kill him. You didn't hold him back. And that's why you get the blessings that I'm giving you. So clearly the text is saying, when Kodesh Baruch Hu tells you to kill your son, you have to kill your son. Isn't that clear from the words?
What's the takeaway nowadays?
Okay, but let's step by step. That's clear from the words. Clear. Reform, shmorm. They're pandering to the contemporary values and to Los Angeles. That words say that if a Kodesh Baruch Hu tells you to do it, that you have to do it. Now, there's a midrash which says it in more, how shall I say, more explicit terms, but it says it by what it doesn't say and what it does say. Listen to what the midrash says. After it was over, Avram said to a Kodesh Baruch Hu, you know, when you told me to sacrifice Isaac, I had a good argument against you. Okay. I think, what good argument could he have had against it? You know one, huh? It's murder. No, that's not what the midrash says. The midrash says, you promised me, ki b'Yitzchak yikarei lechazara, your continuation will come through Yitzchak. At this point in his life, Yitzchak had no children. So you promised me he'll be my continuation, and now you're telling me to kill him. It's a stira. It's a contradiction. So, how am I supposed to understand? It's a contradiction. How am I supposed to respond?
Contradiction within nature, right?
What do you mean within nature?
Because he's God. He can kill him and then revive him and then do whatever, right?
But if that's so, there's not a test. Then it's not a test. Then it's a joke. He says, he tested it. Called his name twice. But obviously, this says, Kach no es bidcha, say Chazal, amod lo li, bezeh, shlo yomu, harishon es lo hoya b'mamish. Stand for me in this test, so they won't say the first 9 that I tested you weren't significant. So he knew it was a test. If that's the outcome, it's not a test at all. Can't count on that. So it's so much of a contradiction that in the Drashas Haran and the Shloh and others say that he would have been within his rights not to kill him. Because Baruch Hu said, he'll continue and kill him. I can't fulfill both. We can't both come true. So I have to pick one. Which one should I pick? Whichever one I pick, I can say, look, you told me to do this one also. The Ran goes so far as to say, that's why it says Kach no, because since when I tell you to kill him, and I told you in the past he'll be your continuation, it can't be a command. Even if I tell you to do it, it can't be a command, because I contradicted it over here. So I'm asking you, please, to do it. Thus says the Ran, because the Ran is a logician, as they all were, but he's applying logic here. Okay? So now, this is what the Midrash says. Midrash says, I had a good argument against you. You told me he'll be your continuation. You told me to kill him. It's a stira. I didn't raise that argument. So you too in the future, when you have a good argument against my children, don't you raise your argument either. Be merciful on them. That's what the Midrash says. Midrash says, I could have objected. I didn't object. You shouldn't object against my children. Now, what did the Midrash leave out? It left out, I could have objected to murder. It doesn't say that. It leaves it out. Obviously, from the point of view of the Midrash, murder isn't an objection. Murder is not an objection. A contradiction is an objection, but murder is not an objection. So now what we have to figure out is why the tradition would see that idea of God telling you to kill someone wouldn't be an objection. So let's try. I don't think this is difficult, but just you have to know where you're coming from in order to undertake the project, but I don't think it's difficult. First of all, let's ask the following question. People who die, what we call naturally. We know that there's providence in the world, because Baruch Hu is running the world. If they die, it's because God decided they should die. Right? Why don't we call God a murderer? He's deciding people should die. Why don't we say that God is evil? Because he's deciding people should die. But we're going to do that. It's just a mistake. We overlooked it. In 3,300 years of Jewish scholarship, we overlooked that question. No, but it's dumb. I'll tell you why. Because Baruch Hu is the one who's giving life. And he's giving it continuously. So for him to decide someone's life should end just means I've been giving you free life all your life. And now I'm not giving you anymore. I've given enough for you to fulfill your purpose, for me to fulfill my purposes. I'm not giving you anymore. If I'm providing you with something and I stop providing you with it, you have no claim. You owe me more. You have to give me more. It's unjust for you to not give me more. If Reuven kills Shimon, he's stopping Shimon from receiving God's life. That's not right. That he has no right to do. But for God to say, I'm not giving you anymore.
But this isn't the case in the story of the Akeidas Yitzchak.
No, I'm going step by step. Step by step. First step is right. We don't say that. Okay. So now let's take capital punishment. Capital punishment. Misas Bezdin. Right. Somebody commits a crime according to certain laws that we have. If you commit this crime, the punishment is death. Right? Do we really have a good argument that the creator of the universe can't order death for a crime? It's wrong for him to order death for a crime? Not allowed to order death for a crime? The same answer applies. He is the one who's giving life, so he can determine when life shall end. Does it matter whether Kadosh Baruch Hu arranges a heart attack and he dies on his own, or Kadosh Baruch Hu is under these and these conditions, the Bezdin should put him to death? What difference does it make? He's giving life, and he's determining when life shall end. Okay, now having said that, come to Akeidas Yitzchak. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, according to my plans for the universe, this is the end of Isaac's life. That's all. There's no more life planned for him. At this point, and I want him to die in the process of a sacrifice. Why is that a crime? What's the problem? It's not murder. When the Creator who gives life, present tense, is giving life all the time, says that a person shall die, that's not murder.
But the Creator, in this case, doing it through an individual.
Same thing with the court. With the court, it's also through individuals. There's an executioner. That's why I brought up that case. That case is a bridge, isn't it?
Contradict with Lo Tirtzach? There's no contradiction?
Of course not. Why should there be kind of Lo Tirtzach? All of the rules of the Torah are given by one lawgiver, and he determines when they apply and when they don't apply. Avodah Zarah, right? You're not allowed to worship other gods, right? But on Yom Kippur, there's the Sa'ir LaAzazel, which is a goat that's offered to something called Azazel. And the Ramban says that is a power in the universe. And because Baruch Hu said, offer it a sacrifice. So the same lawgiver who said, don't worship other powers, said, under this condition, give him a sacrifice. So, okay. That means this is an exception to those laws. They all come from the same body of law. They all come from the same Supreme Court. So then one is an exception to the other.
Okay. So still, the takeaway in our life or lifetime would be that if God Himself.
Yeah, of course. I'll give you another example. What is the main idea? I'll give you another example, which it borders on. It was a very. I wasn't here when it happened, but after the '73 war, the Syrians overran the whole Golan, and there were Jewish bases that were conquered. And in one case, there was an underground hiding place, and there were several soldiers there, and the Syrians were all around. And one soldier was wounded, and he was making noise. So the commander said to one of the other soldiers, kill him. Kill him. Strangle him, so that he won't make noise, we won't be discovered. He did try to strangle him, but didn't succeed. But they were saved anyway. And they were on television. The commander and the one who was wounded. And they asked him, he said you should be killed. And then someone raised the question, we have a point of Jewish law, that when you're surrounded and you're under threat of death, you don't give over one to save the group. Even if, when they capture you, they'll kill him and all the rest. So he's going to die either way. You don't do that. So they said, how did you do that? And these were, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they were Dati soldiers. Right? So they said, war is different. Wartime is different. When I heard this from Rabbi Becher. When I heard that, I realized in wartime you do that all the time. Let's say you have an advancing army, and your people are here, but you want them to think they're over there, so they'll go that way, and then you'll hit them from the back. So what do? You send over there a few hundred soldiers. Here you have 10,000. Send a few over there, and you tell them to shoot from there. They're going to die. They're all going to die. Right. Those 300 die, so as the 10,000 can attack from the back. That's war tactics. We use war tactics. So war is different. War isn't the same condition. So you have to know that these things depend upon conditions. But when the Creator of the universe, who gives life, and who can command capital punishment, and can arrange death for all the people who die of so-called natural causes, if He says, now's the time for this person to die, there's absolutely no moral problem there. Because He's the one who's giving life. Okay, that's the ABCs of the Akeidah. There's much, much, much more going on in the Akeidah. But that's the ABCs of the Akeidah. Yeah. That's the end of the list for tonight. Okay, so you thought of any questions in the meantime?
I have another one perhaps.
Yeah.
About the authority of the Midrashim versus the Mishnayos.
Oh, there's no comparison. First of all, the default position with Midrashim is that they are not literal. The default is they're not literal. So says the Maharal. You don't, like my Maizman taught me. What is the Gemara? The Gemara is what the Rishonim say it is. You don't read the Gemara by yourself. That's dumb. It's sort of like someone trying to figure out what the letters in the Hebrew scroll of the five books of Moses mean without learning from someone who can tell you what letter is what letter and what word is what word. Try to figure it out from the shapes. Right? That would be a dumb project, right? Okay, so the Gemara is for us what the Rishonim say it is, and the Midrash is for us what the commentators say the Midrash says. Right? First of all, they knew all of it, and you're quoting 1 out of 1,000. So you're really not competent to say anything. You're taught not to quote out of context, and then you do it all the time. You find one line, or one half a line, say, see, the Torah said that, so therefore I, B, C, D, B, C. And if you know that the default is that they're not literal, so then if you find commentators who take them literally, then you deal with them literally. Otherwise, you deal with them as poetry and as parables, and you have to figure out what it is the Midrash was trying to express. Instead of taking it like a 6-year-old with a dictionary and saying, it says eat breakfast, so it means eat breakfast. No, could mean start learning Chumash when you're 5. It could mean many, many different things. So, and the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, by the way, people don't know this, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had a whole yeshiva. He didn't sit in scholarly isolation and make up the Mishnah on his own. He had a whole yeshiva. Rashi mentions it in the Gemara. And then they assembled all the materials that they had, discussed and debated them, and then they came to decisions as to how to write the Mishnah, which opinions to take as authoritative, which opinions not. And the Mishnah is not binding. The Mishnah is not binding. The Amoraim, often enough, paskin against the Mishnah. They don't accept Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's decision. It's not binding. The only book of Jewish law which is binding in later generations is the Babylonian Talmud, and only when the Babylonian Talmud says Hilchasa, which means they themselves took a vote and decided what the law should be. No other book of Jewish law is binding. It has the scholarship of those who put it together, but later generations can challenge it. Even, I'm saying this for the recording most, even the idea that the Amoraim could not challenge the sum total of the Tanoim. They couldn't go outside the entire corpus of the Tanoim. They could decide which one to hold like, but not to go outside. So the Kesef Mishnah in Hilchos Marim says that rule arose because they decided it. They decided not to do it, not because there's an authority that the Tanoim had. They decided not to go outside. And Rabbi Chanan Wasserman brings from Rabbi Chaim Brisker that he disagrees with that, and that he said there was a problem with Rabbi Yochanan, and he passed it against the Mishnah, and Tosfos goes in 2 different directions. It's a very complicated thing. Rabbi Chaim Brisker, as reported by Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, said that when the Amoraim decided to go outside the Tanoim, they could do it. They could do it. They had the authority to do it. They weren't bound by the Tanoim. Why is it when an Amora says something and the Gemara quotes a brisa against him, and we say tiyufta? Tiyufta means he's refuted him. We reject his opinion. Why? Because we assume he didn't know the brisa. And we assume that had he known the brisa, he would have changed his mind. And Tosfos says in several places that the Amoraim knew all of the Mishnayos, but they didn't know all the brisas. So it's quite possible that the Amora didn't know the brisa, and had he known the brisa, he would have changed his mind. That's why the Gemara says tiyufta. But if an Amora waves the flag and says, here are all the Tannaitic sources, and I disagree with all of them, he has every right to do that. Now, that Rebbe Chaim is not well known. It's in his commentary on Bava Basra. I've shown it to several Talmidei Chachamim, and they grow pale. And then they took the book upside down, maybe it means something else, and then they faint. But that's what he says. He says it word for word. So even the Tanoim as a body didn't have authority over later generations. If the Kesef Mishnah says they decided not to go outside, it means they weren't forced to. They weren't obligated to. They just decided not to do it. And Rabbi Chaim Brisker says they didn't decide and they could go outside. So no book has authority over later generations. He said the Babylonian Talmud, and the Rambam explains why. He says that, number one, the Babylonian Talmud was circulated to the known Jewish communities, and they all accepted it. So it was the acceptance of the people that gave it its authority. And also he says that Ravina Rav Ashi, were the editors of the Babylonian Talmud, were Sov Bali Ha'atoka. Now, Lahatik in Hebrew means to copy. What the Rambam is referring to exactly, I don't know. I don't know that he explains it anyplace else. But the idea is somehow preserving the tradition in a faithful form. I just mean letter for letter. It means with understanding and with comparisons and contrast and the methodology and all the rest. They were the end of the chain of people who could do that in an authoritative fashion. So the Babylonian Talmud has these two distinguishing marks that no other work has. And that's why it got the authority that it got. But anything, certainly not the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam, certainly not the Shulchan Aruch. The commentators go against the Shulchan Aruch very often. There's one shach where he's going, in Yerodea, where he's going against the Mechaber.
In this question, I meant the Mishnah, the Mishnayot. I meant the Mishnayot versus the
Midrash. Yeah, so I'm saying the Midrash couldn't compare to the Mishnayot. In terms of authority, the Mishnayot are discussed in the Gemara and analyzed and argued back and forth, and the question of the Girsa is raised, and where did it come from, what source of it. Each Midrash stands on its own. It's usually just statements. And argued for it, and sometimes there are, but there's very little argumentation. There isn't generation after generation of argumentation like you have in the Talmud. Talk about the authority of the Midrash it's very, I would say it's very ethereal. I think it would be very difficult to see I guess what you would have to say is that it would be very difficult because the authors of the Midrash are often the very same authors that you have in the Talmud. They're the same people. It would be very difficult to say that a statement in the Midrash is wrong. But on the other hand, it would be very difficult to say that this statement excludes other statements. Often the Midrash has disagreements in it. And there is room to originate ideas which are completely different from all the previous Midrashim. The Ramban writes that when Abraham went down to Egypt, he did something wrong. He shouldn't have done that. And he says, number one, because Baruch Hu told him to go to Eretz Yisrael and didn't tell him to leave, so he should have stayed there. And worse, he says, he put his wife, the tzedekah, in danger. He put his holy, pious wife in danger. He shouldn't have done it. There's no hint of that in any older rabbinic source. So there's and I'm only saying this, I happened to stumble across this. Not that I've learned these firms, the Tosfos Yom Tov in Nazir. How did I come to that? I don't remember. Not that I learned every Tosfos Yom Tov, not even 4% of them. But over there, he mentions this Ramban. He says, Shari HaDrush Lo Nin'olu. The gates of Drush have not been locked. They've not been closed. And Rishonim can understand the psukim and the situations as they see fit. They're not bound to stay within the boundaries of prior work. So Midrash doesn't have anything like the status of the Mishnah. But it can't be treated cavalierly. If Rabbi Yehuda says something in the Midrash, we say that is certainly a valid statement. But there may be other valid statements that contradict it, and there may be other qualifications. It's a big study. I've not invested much in the study of Midrash. It's a very difficult, in that respect, difficult study. But there are many very famous commentaries on the Mishnah. Okay.